here speaking today with Sarah VanOrden, and she's from Crosswinds Farm and Creamery, and she's going to go over today with us about a project that she had funded through the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center. And we're going to talk about some of the technology that she's using on her grazing dairy. I'm going to let Sarah tell a little bit of her background and then talk about the project as well as some of the implications of using this technology and her experience. So with that, Sarah, I will let you go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for taking time to join us today. And I hope this is beneficial for some other farms that might be considering this technology. So just a little bit of background on myself, and then we'll jump into the farm and the project. I've been farming for over 20 years. My husband and I operate the farm together, and we have currently 1 full-time and 4 part-time employees. I originally grew up in Eastern New York on a farm, a diverse farm, and then went to Cornell for animal science and ag business, and then started farming on my own after that in the Finger Lakes. And our farm has evolved a lot since that time. But today we are a diverse grass-based dairy and livestock operation. So we milk we're milking 25 to 30 brown Swiss at any time. We also have a separate beef herd, and we raise pigs and a few laying hens. And all of those products are marketed direct to our community, either through a retail store on our farm, local farmers markets, online sales, and then wholesale to smaller privately owned stores, restaurants, mostly in the Finger Lakes region. We've been operating since 2003, but 2.5 years ago, we purchased a second location, and that has an on-farm creamery and the retail store. So we moved our milking herd to this location in 2022. We have our non-milking animals and our beef herd at our other property, and then we also lease additional land for pasture and hay production. And we are spread out. It's about 45 minutes from one farm location to the other, so we're not in one place a lot of the time. We use all of our milk on the farm. We are 100% grass-fed. We milk once a day. We have a 4-stall flat barn parlor, and then a pack barn, which is mostly just for winter housing. We intensively manage our grazing, so our cows are moving every day, at least once a day, and then we bale graze. Right now we're bale grazing year-round. That's fluctuated depending on some different strategies that we've tried. We'll get into that a little bit. And we also let our cows raise their own calves. So from at any point in time, we may have 5 to 10 calves under 6 months old running with our cows also. So we applied about 1.5 years ago for an innovation grant through the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center to install a health monitoring system. We were having a lot of challenges after having moved to the milking herd to the new farm. Some of that was specific to the new location, but some of that is just our business, in that our cows are only coming in for milking once a day, and then they're out on pasture the rest of the time, and we don't have eyes on them all the time, as opposed to, say, a confinement operation or a larger herd where there's just more people working with the cows on a daily basis, so there's more contact, and it's a little bit easier to watch for natural heat. we're busy and doing a lot of things. And so the cows are kind of on their own a lot of the time. And so we are struggling to catch heats. Our cows struggled after moving them, just because this farm, the soil fertility was not anywhere close to the property that they came off of. We're working on building soil health, but nutrition, like the quality of the pasture, has just not been the same. So it was a rough transition for our milking herd in general. So we were not sure, were we not seeing the heats, or were the cows just not cycling? But reproduction was going backwards for us. We really have a strong preference to not use a bull with our milking cows. We do use bulls for our beef herd, but we have had some bad experiences with dairy bulls in the past. Growing up, I know more now about that, so that may change at some point in the future, but we really have, for safety reasons, a preference for artificial insemination. We have 2 young children. We have the public here on the farm. We really just don't want to have that liability of a bull with the cows. So we really wanted to continue artificial insemination, which is the practice that we have used the whole time we've been farming. We have been 100% AI for the dairy herd. We also have a pretty organic management philosophy. We're not certified organic, but our practices are almost exclusively organic. We really don't want to be aggressively treating the cows. We don't use reproductive hormones, very, very rarely. So those were not great options for us as far as other ways to improve reproduction. So a health monitoring system for us seemed to have a lot of potential for improving some of the challenges that we were facing. We were intrigued with the smaXtec system, specifically because it's a rumen bolus, so it also gives you more information beyond activity, like some of the other systems that are on the market. So we were successful in our grant application, and we installed the smaXtec system in the beginning of June of 2023. And the way that the system works, the cows have an internal rumen bolus. So that is assigned to each individual cow before you put it into them. You can see in the picture here, you put it in just like it's basically the same size as a bovacalc bolus, if you're familiar with them. If you use a balling gun, a specially designed balling gun, to put that into the cow, and then the bolus stays in her reticulum. The bolus is collecting body temperature data, it's collecting activity, and it's collecting rumination data based on contractions of the stomach, so actual rumination data. Then you can see in the smaller photo here, there is a base station and a wand that is mounted. In this case, we have it in our parlor currently, and that picks up signals from the bolus and collects the data, and then uploads that automatically to a cloud-based software system. And this base station has its own internet connection, cell connection. It doesn't use Wi-Fi. It doesn't cost us anything for the internet. We don't have to do anything to make it connect to the internet. It just does that through smaXtec. It has that connection automatically in the base station. It does have to be able to get a cell signal. So if you're in a location where you have no cell service, that may be a problem for the data to upload. It's not something that you can install just on a local network or on your desktop computer. It does have to be cloud-based. But the bonus of that is that then you can access that data anywhere. There is an app, a phone app. I use the app most of the time, but there also is a dashboard that works on a desktop, the laptop computer. So smaXtec's their proprietary software analyzes all of this data, and they are able to use an algorithm that they have created to measure water consumption, so both the volume of water and the frequency that the cows are drinking, and that's based off of the change in the temperature in their stomach. So when the cow drinks cold water, it comes in and the temperature changes, and they can calculate how much water that was based on how much her temperature changed in her stomach. They also use the data to predict the onset of calving, heat detection, and some potential illnesses like mastitis. And then you can set different parameters that when the cow crosses those thresholds, it will send you a notification, either text or email, or you can control where the notifications go, but it will send you an alert that you have a cow outside of your normal settings. So if a cow spikes a fever, it sends you an alert. If the cow is in heat, it sends an alert. And that's somewhat flexible, although I have talked to some other producers that have, like, they're getting alerts for things that they don't necessarily want also. So there's some degree of customization available. So this is a screenshot of the dashboard, just so you can see what it looks like. It gives you sort of daily action lists, cows that need to be bred, need to be looked at for health reasons, ready to check pregnant or dry off. We don't use the feed management program because we're not making a TMR, so we're not adjusting our ration on a daily basis, but that is something that's available. It will show you rumination time down here, and then like a snapshot of the herd. And you can sort of ignore these numbers at the moment because this is outdated, but that's what it looks like. So it creates these graphs, which take a little bit of getting used to, but the green line is rumination. The blue line is temperature, and the dark red line is activity, and then the pink, bright pink, is potential for estrus. So this is for a specific cow. I just pulled one cow to use it as an example, as showing the temp increases. So this cow is a cow that kind of flares up with clinical mastitis occasionally, and improving milk quality wasn't really one of our main goals. This has sort of been like a side bonus of this program, but a cow that's starting to get an mastitis infection will increase their temperature 1 to 2 days before you're going to see any clinical signs. So this little blue bump right here is her spiking a fever prior to mastitis onset. And so the system will send you an alert that the cow is running a fever, and now they're also calculating the likelihood that she's going to come down with mastitis. And I think that algorithm is also looking at changes in intake. So you can see that her rumination dropped off here also. She didn't feel good. And what that does is allows us to be proactive and give some pain relief like aspirin to bring that fever down and make the cow feel better and help her immune system actually combat the mastitis before it gets to a clinical point. And you can see that she recovered from this bout here, and then it happened again about 2 weeks later. So that's sort of I think that feature is very unique to the smaXtec system. And so if that is something that is really important to your goals, that is a plus of this program. We have pretty good milk quality in general. We don't have a lot of clinical mastitis cases, knock on wood. So it's not something we've seen a huge benefit from, but even in the small number of cows that we have had an issue with, it is worthwhile to be able to make her feel better, just improve cow health, and then potentially even discard that milk from the tank because it's probably a high somatic cell count in that time period, even if she's not clinical. Whereas we would otherwise have put that milk into the tank because we wouldn't know that she had an infection until we saw clinical signs of mastitis. As I mentioned, our primary goal was to improve reproduction with this system. And these are some stats looking at where we were a year ago and where we are right now that we've had the system in for a year. Our days in milk at first service for lactation 1 has dropped from 140 to 100 days. So that's a pretty significant improvement. Still a little higher. I mean, all of these numbers are still a little higher than I would like them, but we're going in the right direction for the most part. This is lactation 2. They dropped from 143 days in milk to 114, so that was a 30-day improvement. Our older cows, we did not see a huge improvement with this system, and we'll talk a little bit about why I think that is. But so overall, we have dropped our days at first service by 2 weeks. Our average days open also dropped drastically over the past year. Part of that is because our conception rate improved substantially. We were, for a 6-month period, running over 80% conception rate, and it has backed off a little bit in the past 60 days. And I think that is not totally credited to the smaXtec system. That is more so credited to some improvements in management and overall cow health, which is indirectly related to the technology and some of the decisions we made because of that. And so our overall days in milk is also improving substantially. And a lot of this is going to be a lag effect. Like, we're really just at the beginning of seeing that improvement. We expect that will continue over time, just as some of these problem cows that we were able to get pregnant, that we had been struggling to get pregnant, they sort of are still inflating days in milk, but they will, once they calve in again, then that number will drop more. So one of the things that we've really struggled with this system is accuracy of heat detection. The way that the algorithm calculates the likelihood of estrus is based off changes in activity level and in rumination. So we have seen a lot of fluctuation in rumination, just from day to day and week to week. And then our cows naturally have a lot of variation in activity, depending on if the paddock they're going to is close to the barn or further away from the barn, or just the fact that they're grazing. And, depends on the weather, depends on how far they are from water in that paddock. Lots of variables, as opposed to cows that live in a freestall barn that go to the parlor, come back, go to the bunk, lay down in the stall. Like, their activity level, if they are not in heat, is very consistent from day to day. Our cows are just highly variable because of our management practices. And the algorithm really struggles to differentiate when they are in heat versus when they just have variation and activity. So only 42% of the cows that were in standing heat that I bred in the last year were accurately identified by the system. So the other, 30 some cows that were in standing heat, I identified them, and the system did not ever pick them up as being in standing heat. And they are I'm generally breeding on very strong standing heats. It's not even like it was a questionable heat. So we are really frustrated with that number. We really feel like it should be higher than that. We were hoping we would see improvement over the winter when we were not actively grazing, but the cows still have access to the outdoors in the winter. We bale graze as much as possible. So there's still quite a bit of variation in activity. So we did not see as much improvement as we were hoping over the winter. And then 52% of the cows that have been checked pregnant in the past year were bred on an accurately identified heat. So it's not really telling me that there are heats that the system is picking up that I was missing. There were a few, for sure, some cows that we would have not known she was in heat. But it has not been as high a percentage as we were hoping to see. And then it also flags cows that are not actually in heat. And I've counted 38 inaccurate heats in cows. And this is either cows I just bred 2 days earlier, and I'm sure they were in a standing heat when I bred them, or cows that I maybe palpated because they were showing no signs of heat, but the system was flagging them, and they're not toned at all. I could not justify putting a straw of semen into them. It also, so we do have a second base station, and we have used that some of the time for our open heifers because they're at our other farm, and someone is there doing chores once a day or twice a day, maybe, but not watching them much at all. And so that's been a challenge for us, is to catch those heifers in heat. We've used scratch off patches. We've used a bunch of different things, and we just have not had much success catching them standing. So we have tried the boluses there. And those heifers are actually confined to a concrete pack pen, just to keep them easily accessible to breed. But we don't scrape that pen every day. We scrape it about twice a week. And so when we move them to scrape that pen twice a week, it increases their activity level, and it flags them in heat almost every time, which has been frustrating because maybe they are in heat, or maybe it's just because we're cleaning the pen. And I'm not usually the person that is doing that job. So I then have to call that person and say, hey, is one of these heifers actually in heat, or is it just because you're cleaning the pen? So that we have been able to catch heifers in heat at other times, like when we're not cleaning the pen, we do get some accurate heat detection with the system, but it also is creating inaccurate heat. So if you're in a situation where you maybe have an employee that would be doing the breeding, or marking cows to breed, and they're not being super careful about verifying that the animals actually are in heat, you could end up inseminating a lot of animals that you're not going to get pregnant. The system also does send alerts prior to calving. It should alert you within 30 hours, or you should have a calf within 30 hours from the alert. But those alerts are also based off changes in activity and rumination. So we've had about a 54% accurate calving alerts, and then 32% of the calvings had additional inaccurate early alerts. So we got an alert that the cow is calving, and she is nowhere near calving yet, which has also been frustrating. So a lot of this is our management practices. I think it works much better in confinement situations where the cows have much more consistent daily activity levels. But this is what we've experienced, and that was the whole point of our project, was to see if this technology worked in a grazing or 100% grass-fed situation, and with a smaller herd. And so these are the numbers that we have experienced, and we want to put them out there. So if somebody's in a similar situation, they they can make their own decisions. So one of the other things we wanted to look at was rumination, and just doing a better job of nutrition for our cows in general, with the goal of increasing milk production, and managing our grazing better to improve cow health and milk production. So this is the herd chart from June to September of 2023, so last summer. And the green line is rumination, and then the blue line is water intake. And this shaded zone is the kind of the target goal for rumination, to keep rumination in that zone. So we were getting some really low numbers, and this is for the whole herd as an average, which is a little bit concerning. You can see a couple of these temperature flags. So this was extremely hot days, and it would make sense that rumination is going to be lower on those days because cows are probably not grazing as much. Our cows in a really extreme hot weather tend to bunch, even though they have access to shade and access to bales in the shade. Their intake it still drops, and we're trying to work on ways to mitigate that. But this system is helping us see, like, yes, that is actually having an impact. The temperature does change cow behavior and production, and it gives us a goal to work towards, to see, like, if we change our management practice, how much of an impact does it have? So we were really concerned with these low levels of rumination, and we have done some outreach to some other universities and different individuals in the industry to try to understand, is this normal in a grass-fed herd or not? And we have a lot of data. We're kind of hoping that we can work with someone more in the future to get some better answers on what is or isn't normal. And then this one is the last 3 months, so April through yesterday, of 2024. So sort of as a comparison, from where we were a year ago. This is when we started grazing. We waited until May 15th this year to start grazing. We really wanted the forage to get a little bit more mature, and have more volume of forage in the paddocks. And this year we have also continued to offer dry hay to the cows every day. We actually, so prior to this year, so up through 2023, immediately after milking in the morning, the cows would go to a fresh paddock of grass. And last year, for about 2 months, so May and June, the cows were exclusively on grass. They were not getting any dry hay, or we were giving them enough grass that they weren't eating any dry hay. This year, we decided to move them later in the day to try and capture the higher bricks in the grass, the higher sugar content, to get more energy into them. And we also are not giving them 100% of their intake from grass. They come out of the parlor in the morning and they have dry hay available to them. And they are consuming about half of their intake right now from dry hay and half from pasture. And that is an attempt to improve rumination, and try to decrease some of that variability that we were seeing last year, and also to try to just maintain production a little bit more consistently, and body condition, hopefully, in the cows as well. So you can see we're still seeing some variation in rumination, but we have managed to stay up in the target zone pretty consistently. And definitely, like, there's none of these dips that were well below the ideal zone last year. This was last week, it was obnoxiously hot here. The heat index was 110 for several days in a row. It really, for the middle of June, was record abnormal high temperatures, I think. And you can see, like, we definitely did have some temperature spikes on the herd as a whole, but we didn't see such terrible rumination as we had seen last summer. So I do think that what we're doing is helping. We have maintained milk production. Our milk production is actually substantially higher than it was last year, and that's partially due to better days in milk, more fresh cows currently, but cows are also sustaining production better as well. And so I do think that this has had a big, like, using this data has helped us to make management changes that have had a positive impact on our herd and our production level, and that will translate into improved profitability. It's actually interesting if you pop back over here. This is before we started grazing. These days where rumination was very low, the cows broke out and tried grazing places where there really was not much grass yet, just because it was starting to get green. And you could see that the rumination really dropped off there because they spent a lot of time trying to graze where there was not much forage in the pastures, and they weren't eating or ruminating. They were trying to eat, but they weren't actually getting much out of it. They spent a lot of time doing that, and so I thought that was just interesting to see that that's what was happening there, and actually probably right here before we started grazing. So is that what's happening? Like, was that happening last year when we were seeing very low rumination? And I think that probably was the case some of the time, is that they weren't getting enough forage. Like, we were not giving them big enough paddocks to completely fill them up, and they were grazing too low, and it was taking them too much work to get enough intake. So that's been an interesting observation. And then this is the two, 2023 and 2024, side by side, sort of lined up as best I could for the same time period, just to kind of look at the variation in the graph. So I wanted to summarize with some things that I wish we had known before we started with the smaXtec system. They're mostly logistical things that might impact your operation depending on what your system is. One thing that is kind of important is that the base station, the wand, does not read through metal siding or concrete walls. So if you have cows that are on both sides of sheet metal, you may need another base station, or your cows will only update once a day. So right now, our cows only update when they're out on pasture. They're only updating when they come in the parlor. The base station is weatherproof. There's been some inconsistency with the customer support throughout our time working with smaXtec, and this is one of those things where we were initially told that we should have the base station protected from the weather, and now we've been told it's fine to put it on the exterior of the building and have it exposed to the weather. So we may try doing that, moving our base station to the outside of our barn. Actually, I thought I had put a picture in here that showed that a little bit better, but I don't. It appears to have disappeared. So that the cows will update throughout the day as opposed to just once a day, and see if that improves the accuracy of our heat detection and our calving alerts. So that's something we're going to try. The activity settings need to be adjusted, and that's not something you can do. It's something customer support has to do. If you are a grazing herd, they need to adjust those settings for the activity levels. And if you graze part of the year and then your cows are tightly confined the rest of the year, they're going to need to adjust those settings every time. Like in the fall, they'll need to adjust them when the cows come off pasture, and they'll need to adjust them when they go back on pasture, or they're not going to accurately pick up heats and estrus or in calvings at all. The other thing that we noticed is that the temperature of the water that the cows are drinking impacts the calculation for the volume that what the algorithm is telling you they're drinking. So like we run our processing water out to the cows, the water that we're using to cool our pasteurized milk, and it's warm. It's hot sometimes, but it's warm, and the cows love it in the winter. But that throws off the change in their rumen temperature. So it will look like we might get a flag for a cow for insufficient water intake when what actually happened is she drank warm water, and so it just doesn't know that she drank that water today. We've also seen the opposite, where if they're drinking very cold water, like if they're drinking from a frozen stock tank in the winter, or some other water that's just above the freezing point, it overinflates the amount of water that they're drinking. So that's just something that you kind of have to be aware of and adjust your management for. In order for a group to be an individual group, you have to have 20 cows. So like the group of heifers that we have boluses in is only a small group, and so they can't be segregated to isolate their activity levels. They're in the same group as our lactating herd, even though their activity is very different. And so that's something that as a small herd is important to know. And just in general, the customer support from smaXtec has been very inconsistent. There is an onboarding process that you go through for about 6 weeks when you install the system, which is great. But then there were some other claims that were made. The initial reason that we got to base stations was to put one on, to make one mobile and attach it to solar panels and move it around the pastures with the cows. And apparently that is possible, but we were told that it would be set up that way when we got it, and that's not actually the case. Like smaXtec will not provide that for you. We were told also that we would be able to connect with bolus, which is the herd software that we used about a year ago, that was coming online, and we just found out accidentally last week that it is actually online. Like we can connect with our software, but up to this point we've been double entering herd management information in both the smaXtec system and the bolus system. So communication about that has not been great. So we're excited that we will actually be able to connect them now, but it would have been good to know that earlier. And we also have just really struggled with getting the settings correct to pick up our activity levels. And at one point, customer support consulted with their New Zealand counterparts, because this is a global system and it is in use in herds in other parts of the country. And there's a lot of grazing in New Zealand, and their recommendation to us was that we should just get a bull to breed our cows if we wanted to have their heat detection. And that was really frustrating, because that was 100% the reason why we put the system in, is so that we do not need to use a bull for repro. So some of that has been challenging. Overall, we really do feel like the system has merit, but not for some of the reasons, or not as much for the reasons that we initially expected when we put it in. So it's something we do plan to continue to use, and to use the data to make management changes. But if your primary goal is reproduction improvement and you are a grazing herd, I don't know that this is the best option. I don't have experience directly with any of the other health monitoring systems, so I don't know that any of the others would work better than this, but I would say that using it in grazing herds is definitely a little bit of a challenge.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah. I thought your presentation was wonderful. You went over so many good things, different aspects of the technology that you implemented, the good and the bad, and what you'd like to see in the future, and how you'd like to improve. Do you see yourself continuing to use this technology, or do you think that it's something that is not worth the time it takes to implement
we'll
it
continue to use
forward?
it. Yeah, no, we'll definitely continue to use it. Now that we have, like, the initial time investment is really the onboarding and getting familiar with the technology and the data reporting initially. So now that we're over that hurdle, it doesn't take a lot of time on a daily basis to use the data that it is giving us. But also there's just so much data there that we would like to utilize for bigger, like to analyze bigger management changes in the future. That's pretty cool. I think that just the amount of data that's available is really unique.
Another question is, do you have any idea on the maintenance cost, or how or when a next purchase would have to be? I don't know how long they recommended the boluses work, or did they say that there was any other additional costs coming soon?
That's a good question. Yeah, the boluses are supposed to be warranted for the life of the cow. They expect the battery to last about 5 years. We do have an older herd, so we expect that our cows will probably outlive the battery life on the boluses, but they will replace them in this. Like, if the cow is still alive, they will send you a new bolus. And then the base station, I don't know that there's a life expectancy specifically for that. I mean, that's plugged in, it's not running out of battery. So as long as nothing damages it, I would expect that that would last for a long time. And then we're just paying a monthly service fee per cow. So to continue to operate the system is about, let's see, it's $48 per cow per year to keep them on the system. So I think that the benefit there is it's pretty easy to see an economic positive gain from that investment.
Great, nice, thanks for sharing that. One question did just come up, and it is also related to cost. This person is asking, what is the cost of the base units, and how far is the range of a unit?
I think their bases are roughly 5,000 a piece. That may have increased in the last year, I'm not sure. The range is, we've been told different numbers. Initially, I think we were told 300 yards. But then I've heard much longer numbers than that, as long as there's not blockades, like barriers in the way. So if you have like a hill, that the signal will not go up and over the hill and down to the other side. So it needs to be sort of like in a low point or on fairly flat ground. Trees are not an issue. Metal buildings are an issue. So it's a little bit site specific, but I would say a minimum of 300 yards, but potentially even further than that.
I understand. Well, we will wrap this up for today. So thanks again for presenting your information and about your project with us. And I will forward any questions I get to you.
And thanks for everybody for joining us.